the look, I'm prepping my lips with a Lush product, which is their lip scrub in popcorn flavour, because that's my favourite one, and I'm using a clean mascara on just to brush away any of the dead skin. So this is a really good technique for anyone who suffers with dry lips like I do, and I find that it just gets the skin nice and clean and ready. So I always make sure if I'm wearing a red lip or a statement lip that I prep the lips by removing any dead skin, and then I'll just moisturise them with a little bit of lip tint or Vaseline, or Blistex normally works for me. For most of my makeup looks, I tend to always start with the eyes, so I like to start with the brows first, and I'll brush the hairs up just to see where I need to fill in with a product, and the product that I mainly use is MAC Brow Pencil in Spite. As you can see, I'm sketching a fine line underneath the brow and then sketching away from the line that we've drawn, always making sure that my pressure is really light for this, as I find with Spite Brow Pencil, if you are a little bit heavy-handed with it, it goes really dark really fast and you can't control the kind of shade that you want to create with it. So I always make sure that I'm super light and then fill in as I go. So in my own makeup, I always like to create a textured brow or a 3D brow. So I'll do this by using a clean mascara wand, and then what I'll do is just fade away small parts of the brow, mainly the front of the brow, to create a 3D or faded finish. And just remember, when you are doing this, you're always going to go in the direction of the hair. So if it's at the front of the brow, you're going to follow the hair upwards. To create a sharpness underneath the brow, I'm going to use a 252 brush by MAC, which is a flat concealer brush, and a really fit concealer by MAC, also in Studio Finish in shade NC20. I'm now using the tip of the brush to create a really sharp line underneath the brow. This is really good if you've created any mistakes with the pencil, or you're wanting to alter the shape of the brow just a little bit. You can use this concealer just to erase any part of the product that you're not happy with. I'm just doing it to create a really sharp, clean line, and I'm only applying it to the brow bone. I'm not bringing it down onto the lid because I will use something else for that product. To blend the concealer into the skin, I'm using a 227 Zoeva brush with no product, and I'm using small circular motions just to soften down any lines and get rid of any seams that you may see on the inside of the eye and on the temple area. I will then go in with a damp beauty blender to create a really flawless finish by removing any bristle marks by just pressing really lightly on top of the concealer the whole way across the eye. Now for my eye base, I'm actually using a brow product by MAC which is called Redhead. So it's traditionally used in the brows, but I actually love it all over the lid, and I'm using my 252 to flatten that product down, and then I'll blend it into my concealer using a clean 227 brush. Something that's really important to me is the pressure of your hand when applying makeup, so I'll always go back and forth in circular motions, being really soft with my touch. I find that with an eye shape like mine, which is hooded, if you are a little bit more heavy-handed, the bristles tend to skip over parts of your skin and leave patches, so it's always good just to be really light with your touch, especially when you're using a lot of products or intending to do quite a heavy look. You want to avoid using heavy pressure and be really soft, and you'll get a much smoother finish. I'm now applying one of my favourite shadows, which is Chickadee by Makeup Geek Cosmetics, and you'll notice that I'm taking the product quite high for this. I'm using a 221 Zoeva brush, and I'm blending in circular motions above the socket. For my eye shape, it's always really important to take my first couple of blends really high, almost into the brow. This means that later on when I do add in my darker colours, you'll still be able to see this first blend. I'm using matte mineralized powder in medium golden. This is a really good background colour to start off with, as it creates a skin shade for me and matches the tone of my skin. The powder itself is really soft and satin-like, so it doesn't give a powdery finish for the first blend. Now adding more depth to my background, I'm going to use Desert Sand by Makeup Geek, using the same brush, which is a 221 Zoeva, and slowly add more colour in, starting at the socket and blending outwards. I'm often asked which is the best shape for a hooded eye. I find that for each individual person this is different. For myself, I find that blowing the product out in large circular motions towards the brow and the ear always gets a really nice shape for me. Now creating more layers with another product which I absolutely adore by MAC, which is Uninterrupted Eyeshadow, which at the moment is discontinued, but there is talks that it's going to be brought back. So by the time I've uploaded this YouTube, hopefully it'll be back in stores because it's absolutely amazing. This product is also a pro long wear product, which states it has a 8-hour plus wear, which I find is amazing on a hooded eye because most hooded eyes tend to get quite greasy or oily with the natural fold in the skin, so this works great for me. I'm now going to begin creating some depth with the socket. So what I'm going to do here is I'm using Cocoa Bear Makeup Geek Shadow and a 221 MAC brush, which is a really fine thin brush, and I'm going to start creating where I want my socket to be. So as we all know with hooded eyes, the sockets can be quite low near the lash line, so I'm going to take the shadow high and above my socket to create an appearance of a deeper, larger socket. It's really handy just to keep the previous brush to hand with a little bit of uninterrupted still on the edges of the brush, just to dissolve down any harsh lines that you may get when applying your Cocoa Bear. As you can see, I continuously go back in my brushes just to soften down the edges of all my shadow. I find that with my eye shape, if I do get a blunt line or harsh edge, it can make my eye look smaller, so I want everything to be really blown out and rounded and soft. To create a really intense metallic lid colour, I'm using Untamed by Makeup Geek. I find that by applying this product with my fingers, I can control how much I actually put onto the lid. Sometimes with foiled eyeshadows such as this, I feel that when I'm using a brush, it can become over-processed and become really thick and creased. It's also really important on my kind of eye shape that you put just enough on and you don't over-apply products, as they can transfer onto the upper lid. Now for my favourite part of any makeup. I love using Maybelline gel liner with an angle brush to create my liner. My chosen angle brush would be a 317 by Zoeva. Creating a liner for a hooded eye is always different on each person. I find for me personally, working my way from the inside out always works best. I also never fully close my eye for this part of the application. I find that keeping my eye just slightly open keeps the skin on my eyelid nice and smooth, and then the brush doesn't jump parts of the skin and create little dints or skips in the liner itself. Now for the flick itself. I always start this with the eye open, drawing a really thin line leading away from the waterline. I then close my eye, turn my brush around and pull the line back inwards and join it up with the liner that I've done on the lid. You'll then be left with a really small gap that you just need to fill in with a little bit of gel liner, and I then repeat this process until I'm happy with the width and the length of the liner. Now, if you do struggle with transferring eyeliner, which is where your black line transfers onto the shadow as the day goes on, I always find that using a black shadow is amazing for setting the liner and also making it look neater and darker. I always use Urban Decay Blackout as I find it's the darkest one and I get no transfer from this product. I also like to apply just a small amount of glue on the insides of my eye at the root of the lash. I do struggle sometimes with lashes staying on my eyes because they do kick off at the edges, so I find if I put a little bit of glue there, let it go tacky, then place my eyelashes on, they stay on all night and I don't get that turn up at the end. For this look I used Eldora M103 lashes. I'm now going to begin framing my eyes. I'm using Graph Black by MAC Cosmetics. I also find that this works really well if someone gets watery eye, as the consistency of the pencil is quite waxy and it's quite resistant to water. And just like what I did on top liner, I'm going to set this liner with black shadow to stop it from watering, also to give it a matte finish and take away any shine. Now using one of my favourite products by MAC, this is Strobe Cream in Gold Light. So it's a highlighting cream that has a gold finish to it, and I'm using my fingers because I really want to work it into the skin. I find that you can use this product in replacement of a moisturiser. I sometimes use a moisturiser and strobe cream and then a primer on top, but it really just depends on how my skin is on the day. I'm going to be recreating the skin that I did whilst in Japan. My skin was a little bit tired from all the travelling, so I wanted a full coverage. For this, I mixed LA Girl foundation with Cover FX drops and also Studio Fix. I really love different characteristics from each foundation. I love a creamy finish because my skin's a little bit dehydrated, so I went with the LA Girl and the Cover FX drops, but I also wanted a full coverage, long-lasting foundation in there as well, hence why I added in the Studio Fix. I'll go in firstly with a flat foundation brush and I'll apply one layer over the skin, and then I'll keep repeating this until I'm happy with the coverage. And like I mentioned before, my skin wasn't the best because I'd been doing a lot of travelling on long haul flights, so I was a little bit pink and I was a little bit dehydrated, so I needed a good coverage but something that wasn't going to dry me out too much. So the ratio between the foundations was that there was a lot more LA Girl and Cover FX than there was Studio Fix. Once I've got my layers on there, I'm happy with my coverage. I'll then perfect the finish of the foundation using a damp beauty blender and just a tiny little bit more of the foundation. Now using a clean blending brush just to get to them hard to reach places. As this was a night look, I'm going to create a cream contour using Cover FX Stick Concealer in shade 10. I'm going to begin by using a flat foundation brush and I'm going to paint it along all the areas that I need to darken. I like to blend my contour as soon as I've applied it, just because I find sometimes it sets and it's really hard to move along on the foundation. Here I'm using a Bluebell brush, which is a really soft synthetic brush. I'm using it just to push around the cream and concealer and dissolve it down until I'm happy with the blend. And with all contouring, I always suggest to people to take a look at their face shape and their head shape and see what they actually want to change and what features they want to push back and what they want to bring forward. What works for one person won't necessarily work for you. An example of this would be that I always shade my hairline and my forehead, and that's to make my forehead look a little bit smaller, but you may not necessarily need this. So I always advise, have a little play with your cream contour and see what suits your face. Now that I have my cream contour on, I need to set this with a powder. I'm going to do this with a large powder brush and MAC Mineralized powder in dark tan. One thing that I found with doing this technique is it is really important to powder the contour after you've popped it on. I find that if you don't powder certain areas of the contour, they become really shiny and it can become really obvious that you've cream contoured. So using a soft powder like Mineralize is great for softening down and also setting the contour. Now I'm going to intensify the contour by using a darker shading product, which is a bronzer by Topshop and a 105 Zoeva brush. Also using a small blending brush to apply a little bit of the Topshop bronzer to the tip of my nose and up the bridge. To set the foundation and also bake, I'm going to use my favourite powder, which is Laura Mercier setting powder. As I mentioned, I was a little bit dehydrated when I filmed this just from travelling, so I didn't want to over powder the skin and create a dull finish. So instead of going in with a sponge, I'm going to use a really soft blending brush just to apply the product under my eyes and dust around the forehead. And if you do suffer from acne prone skin like myself, I got on 6 different flights in the space of 2 weeks and it caused my skin to really break out and be dehydrated. It's really great to use this technique of mixing different foundations together. I like to have a full coverage, but I don't like to lose the moisture of something that's a little bit sheerer and more hydrating. So mixing 3 different foundations together is literally the best thing to do to customize something to suit your skin type. Using my damp beauty blender, I'm going to pick some of the Laura Mercier powder up and I'm also going to slide it just underneath the contour, and this is going to give me a more flawless finish and also intensify the contour. I'll leave this for a couple of minutes. I don't really usually have a rule on how long I leave it. It normally depends on what my skin's like. So if my skin's a little bit dry, I won't leave it there for too long. Now adding a little bit of warmth to the cheeks, I'm using Copper Tone Blusher by MAC and a soft powder brush. I'm going to add the blusher to the front of the cheeks and then drag backwards into the contour. For my skin type, I really like to use creamy highlighters before I use a powder. I'm using a 222 shading brush by Zoeva, also with a stick highlighter by NYX, which is Bright Idea. I'm going to add this to the high points of my face and where I want to create a shine, and then I'm going to add a powder straight over the top which will stick to it and create a really gorgeous pop-in highlight. For me, when I combine a creamy highlighter with a powder, I feel like they wear just so much more nicer. I feel that they last a little bit longer and they also don't fade away. So on top of my cream highlight, I'm going in with Becca Champagne Pop Powder and I'm using the same brush. I'm going to just lightly dust this over the cream and the product will grab to it really well. Now using a clean powder brush, I'm going to dust away the Laura Mercier that was underneath the contour. With this part I am a little bit more heavy handed because I want to work the product into the skin and set the foundation that sits just underneath the contour. Now that I've completed the skin, I can carry on with the eyes. A lot of people feel like by darkening the underneath of a small eye that you're going to make it actually smaller. In my case, I find that if I do deepen underneath the eye and blow out the shadow underneath, I actually make my eyes look a lot bigger, and it also frames the eye. So I'm going to go in with a pencil by MAC called Coffee, and I'm going to buff it underneath the lashes. Not too neat, doesn't matter if it's neat or not, you're going to blend this out. And then I'm using a 231 Zoeva brush with no product. I'm just going to softly pull my brush back and forth and diffuse out this product. To set the pencil under the eye and stop it from moving or creasing, I'm now going in with a 234 Zoeva brush, which is a flat shading brush. I'm applying a little bit of the Cocoa Bear to the tip of the brush and just patting it on top of the pencil and buffing out. I'll then use a soft buffing brush like a 227 or a 221 Zoeva brush with a small amount of uninterrupted eyeshadow on the end, just to dust over the edges of the coffee pencil and the Cocoa Bear to give a smoky finish. The white shadow that I'm now applying on the inside of the eye and under the brow is Sex by Illamasqua, and I'm using this to create a matte highlight. I also really recommend using smaller mascara ones for smaller eyes. So the one that I'm using now to give myself a first coat on the lashes is NYX Extra Mints Lash, and it's really tiny. It's great for getting in between each hair, and it's also great when you've got false lashes on, just to get underneath and add a little bit of a layer of mascara to darken the lash. And finishing off the brows, giving more texture with NYX Brow Gel in dark brown. So this is my go-to red lip combo, which is Cherry Pencil by MAC and also Ruby Woo Lipstick by MAC. Now Ruby Woo is very matte, so it's really important, like at the beginning of my tutorial, that you exfoliate the lips. If you're like myself and have larger lips, you'll find that you can crack a little bit easier. So if you go in there, get rid of all the dead skin and then apply your lipstick, later on you shouldn't get any cracks and it should stay on there for you perfectly. And I think Cherry Pencil has a really tiny undertone of pink to it, so when I'm going in and outlining my lips, I do a really thick line, and this is just so that there's a bit of a variation in colour, and I feel like it makes my lips look a little bit bigger and it adds to the effect of the overall look. So it creates like a really gorgeous retro kind of finish, and I like lipsticks that aren't just one colour, and I love blending two different colours together. And last but not least, I'm going to finish this look using Urban Decay Setting Spray. Now you don't have to go crazy with this, just a light mist will do the job. So big thanks to everyone who watched this tutorial on a makeup look I did whilst in Japan. Be sure to watch the video log, hit the subscribe button and leave me some comments because I love to see what you have to say.